I am Asha Dore, and I am the editor-in-chief of Parley Lit, and this is Totally Biased Reviews. And I'm here with...
And Gudger, I am the author of The Fifth Chamber, which is a memoir, a real memoir. Someone asked me today if it was fiction. No, it's actually a memoir based on my actual life. Um, it has been described as a tender and honest memoir about the dance of loss and life and how grief can make the heart beat stronger than ever before. And I'm just so happy to be here with you today.
Me too. I'm really happy that you're here. Who should read your book?
Everybody should read my book. I do. I think I think it's for everyone. It is, its its coreness is around grief, but as I like to say, like grief is deep and wide and far flung. It's not just the sad parts of life, it's also us navigating our way through grief, finding beauty and joy on the other side. When I hear the word grief, I don't just think of the sad, but I'm a weirdo that way, right? Because this is part of the world that I exist in. I think it's for adults. I think it'd be a bit much for a kid. Don't like it when people say it's just a book for women. I'm like, no, it's a book for humans. It's a book for anybody who's had a loss, and that is everybody. And if you haven't had one already, this could be like a nice primer to give you a heads up of what could be down the road for you.
I like that a lot. I tend to agree with you, and I think that your book is so image-based and lyrical that it's really available. It makes this experience, both the grief experience and just the memories that you shared of your life, so available to the reader. So I would be surprised. I'm surprised to hear that somebody said it was like a woman's book
Well, people say that about so many books that are written by women.
by women. Yeah. It's really unfortunate.
I had seasons of just feeling like this book isn't going to happen,
Mhm.
right? So I have multiple essays in the world. I love writing essays. Like I can get my arm around an essay. Just they're they're yummy, right? And they inspire me and they're easy to start and work on and finish and get in the world. So there was for a time I was like, no, I think my first book is going to be a collection of essays instead. And I really did set this down. So when I say 12 years, it also includes the time of me like putting it aside. But then as I say about it, it just kept talking to me, right?
Mhm.
So I'd set it down, I'd leave it alone. And then I just kept hearing it like it wanted to be a book in the world. So I'd dig back into it and find something new and rearrange and revise and pitch so many parts of it. And yeah, and then started sending it out in the world. And it finally got picked up.
What do you think are the strengths of your book?
Oh, I think the strengths of my book are the fact that it is true to the experience of being widowed young. I did my best to land on that sweet spot of staying true to what happened, but also writing about it from the long view, right?
Mhm.
Because it's now been 36 years since my first husband died. I asked myself over and over while I was writing, like, why now? Why am I writing this now? Because it's a different book than the version I wrote when he'd only been dead 10 years. Thank God nobody published that one. It's a really different book. So I think that one of its biggest strengths is like you could be in the depths of your sorrow and I'm right there with you. But I also have a long view. And so in that way I offer hope and the possibility that there's more. And I found my way back to a beautiful life. And as I think so often, like if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Combination of the just really beautiful things and the really stark reality of just being in the after of something like that. And that's something that I can really relate to, and I think is really hard to communicate to people who don't have that experience. And I think you did that really well. The before and after setup was a really nice structure for that.
For me, that is what grief is. That whole 5 stages, that old way that we used to talk about it, doesn't work for most people. But
Mhm.
the concept of what was life before, what's like after, how does some of your before come into some of your after? How does some of the after go back and touch on the before?
Mhm.
That's what fascinates me.
I had a therapist once, first time I did EMDR, and I asked her, are there just like two of me? Is there the me before my dad died and the me after my dad died? Like I can't remember what it was like to live in a world where death wasn't real yet. And it has always felt really weird to me that there are so many people walking around and they don't know that it's really real,
That
And
makes me cry.
I know,
The
I know. It's
the
wild. And she said, no, you'll never ever know what it's like to be in the before. You'll never know. It's like that was a different person, just a stunning part of reality, you know? So I appreciated that. And the titles kind of, for me, because I have that perspective, they worked as this kind of like drum beat.
language rhythm is so important to me in my writing. And I also wanted, it's also just like signposts for readers, right? Because this book covers a lot of territory. So really, there's stuff in it from my childhood up until Jacob and Karma Rose were married 5 years ago, right? So this is a big stretch of time.
Yeah.
And I always want readers to feel held, right? So that you're not like, what, what backpacking thing? What's happening? What's, so that also just made it clean. So now you know, oh, this is before time and this is after time. And I joked I wanted some of the befores to be like before, and
Mhm.
some of the after to be like after.
Yeah.
And my editor was like, let's not get too clever.
What do you hope that your book does for people / the world?
My big mission in the world is to normalize grief, to give grief a microphone, to have it be something that we talk about. That's part of life, not something that we shy away from, that is so taboo in our culture. And I am just doing my part to make it less taboo and to make it something, that people can talk about openly. So my hope is that it's for people who aren't able to talk about it, it's a starting point. I also really hope that my book can be a companion book, right? When you're in your hardest grief, like there were stretches of time that sleeping is really hard. And I would be up at odd hours, and I regularly woke up between 3 and 3:30. And years later, I had an acupuncturist who said, "Oh yeah, that's grievers time." And I'm like, I'm testament to that, man. That's when I would wake up and be up for a while. And nobody was awake at that time. So that's when I read, that's when I wrote. And so part of my hope for my book in the world is that for people who are struggling, it can be a bedside companion. And when it's whatever hour and the people you love who support you are not available, you can open my book and know that somebody sees you and hears you.
I think that's really wonderful. And I'm thinking about how poetic it is. And I feel that that's a really effective form for that kind of experience because it does like have the body. Like you feel it more in your body. It's less plot tied than it is like sensory and somatic.
I was just at a book group today, and it's one of the things that we talked about. Like for me in writing, I always have a big question that I don't have the answer to, right? And if I already knew the answer to the question, why would I go write about it? As a reader, to me, I mean, I can tell when somebody already kind of knew the answer to their question in the writing. Like for me, it lacks an authenticity. So I'm always like, my big question in this book was, how do you bear the unbearable? And I didn't have an answer to that. I'm still not sure that I do, but it's how I worked my way through it.
Yeah, I love that. So what's one of your favorite scenes in your own book?
Actually, some of my favorite scenes are the backpacking scenes. The backpacking scenes are in there because as I was writing my way through, one of my questions for myself was, okay, I know the things that hurt me, but what are the things that held me? Right? Because it couldn't just be, if it was just 276 pages of sadness, nobody would read it. Right. And that's where the backpacking and the ranch came up. And I think like the backpacking on their own, it has to be part of the book. When I've gone and read places, there's a part of me that always wants to read a backpacking scene. I'm like, yeah, but if people want to know what the book is about, that is supportive of it, but it's not the core thing they're looking for. I also
Mhm.
really like the dreams.
Yeah,
I like to break rules, right?
mm,
And one of the rules in writing is like, don't write your dreams. Don't write your dreams. Somebody else told me don't ever write about therapy. Someone very well known was like what she said, which I thought was really funny. Don't write about your therapy. I don't want to go to mine. Why would I want to go to yours? Right. And I was like, oh, okay. But of course, I wrote about it because that way I could put grief words in other people's mouths besides mine.
I sometimes I wonder if those rules come from traditions that are kind of outdated, right? Like everybody is in therapy now, and it's sometimes your therapist is your closest person, like the only person who knows.
Yeah.
things. So of course you can't give the reader the advice, otherwise you sound like an asshole who's just like, this is what you should do when you're grieving.
Well, and then, our dear friend Christy Tate, when she came out with Group, that was such a success. So
Mhm.
then within my writing group, we all laughed about that. Okay, now no, I'm not going to ever listen to the again, like don't have therapy. I'm like, look at this book. It's all therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's done very well and people love it. And it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, everybody wants to hear what you say at therapy. I don't know where that rule came from. Like, obviously, memoir wasn't like as popular because, like, honestly, I want to know what everybody is actually admitting in therapy. That's why people watch reality TV.
It
Like,
is why people watch reality TV. Oh my gosh, you could do an anthology just of that. Because I agree with you. People want to know, right? Because it is, again, it's that thing. It's that place where you are raw. And if you're doing the work, it's a place where you're raw and vulnerable. And it's those, oh, this makes, I can feel it in my heart. This makes, so we might have to do this because I can feel it. But
mhm,
it is where people are most connected,
yeah,
right? I really believe that we connect through stories and through being vulnerable with our own, and then other people get to see little parts of theirs within ours, and then we get to witness other people's stories, and that's what I'm here for.
yeah, absolutely. And I think in therapy, many people are the most okay with being wrong, like with making mistakes and learning.
Absolutely, because you do. I mean, if you go to your therapist and you're like, okay, here's all the shit I have figured out, then what's the point?
Is there anything else that you want to say?
My daughter and I host a monthly reading series called Coffee Talk. It's something that we started at the beginning of the pandemic. And we did it while we were all sheltering. And we had, like so many people, we had this strong desire to be together while we were apart. It actually was her good idea. And because I'm lucky to know so many writers, I had access to the people. So when we started it, we had no idea what would happen with it. We just started it as everybody's home, let's do this thing. Initially, we did it every week, which was exhausting after the fourth week. So then I went to every other week. And then eventually we went to once a month. It is still going strong. So it's the first Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock Pacific time. There's a Zoom link that is on our Facebook page. That page is Coffee and Grief Community. We laugh because we apparently like coffee. Um, we just hosted our 53rd coffee talk, which we loved having you on.
Was so awesome.
It's so fun. It's every once in a while, like life, I mean, life gets busy and I'll have moments where like, I don't know if we can keep doing this, but then we do it and people come and it matters to people. And then I'm like, oh no, it's always beautiful. I've never walked away a Thursday night and thought, I always feel enriched, nourished, like my heart is bigger, better from listening. And it matters to people. So we'll keep doing that. Out of the coffee talks grew our podcast. So we have a podcast called Coffee, Grief, and Gratitude. And it's been wonderful. I've loved doing it. Again, I do it with my daughter. These were her ideas, and it's just a delight to get to do it with her. And so far, we've used a really similar format. So the people we've had on have been writers. We have them read a short piece, and then we have a series of questions that we've sent them ahead of time that we talk about. And it's just to learn other ways that people experience their grief, how they navigated their grief. I've learned so much from it. It's been so beautiful because we've had, people hear the word grief and they think the death of a loved one, right? And that is true. And that is a big grief. But grief covers so many things. So we've really made this an effort to have to expand what our definition of grief is. So we've had people's grief over their health. We had one over gender identity. We've had around place, around home, around land. As Maria and I say, like we started it to learn more about grief. And I really have. Like I've learned so much. And that's what keeps me in it and interested in it, and having people really share um, the different ways that they've experienced grief and how it's landed on them, how they've navigated through it or not, what was helpful for them, what wasn't helpful for them. We always say we're not offering advice, but if you listen, there's just all kinds of yumminess you can take away, different things that people that I hadn't thought of, that our listeners might not have thought of that I really do think enrich our lives. So that's been beautiful. Then our other biggie is twice a year in October and February, we offer a writing course called Write Your Grief Out. And it is 30 days of writing. There are writing starts. I prefer the word starts to prompts because I always say prompts feels like I'm poking you, right? So writing invitations every weekday, and we have Zoom calls twice a week. So it's a total of 8 Zoom calls. Maria and I both love the Zoom calls because you just see this connection between people who were strangers and the evolution of how we start at the beginning of the month. And by the end, how people are just so connected and writing their stories, and all the writing starts are ones that I've come up with. And it's my goal, like just to offer different lenses to see your grief in a different way. So I use a lot of nature and fairy tales. And, if your grief were a color, if you took your grief to lunch, what would you talk about? If grief were a soup, what would you put in your grief soup? Right. So it's trying to access that unconscious, that deeper story, not just this happened and that happened. And it's just been really beautiful to witness people having this different experience with their grief, and when they really stay in it and do it fully.
I love your projects. I love seeing your updates and stuff. Would you like to read an excerpt from your book?
I would. I am going to read one of the dreams. So there are actually, I'm not sure, 4 or 5 dreams in the book. All the dreams are in first person. So I love to know form so that I can break form. So for me, part of the dream, I'm very clear, like you're in a dream, and then because they're in present tense, then the next time you see present tense, hopefully your brain goes, oh, we're back in dreamland. So this is an after chapter. I had that dream. In waking life, I was getting to know Scott, letting him in our little family band, following my heart that thrummed and thundered, Scott. In sleeping life, there was Kent. I moved from the 2-white hall into Jake's bedroom with teddy bears and alphabet blocks tumbling on the wallpaper border I glued up one winter afternoon. There you are, Kent says. I've been looking for you. I spill an armful of laundry, tiny t-shirts and pants and blankets and sheets plunk to the rust orange carpet. Baby socks roll like they're battery powered. You're here, I say, my heart twittering like a caught feral animal. You're here. I want to race to him, but my feet are stuck in concrete in that stuck dream way. I'm so happy to see you. Kent smiles, tense his left eyebrow and lowers his right. Checkmark brow, what you doing, brow? He picks up one of Jake's blankets and unfolds it, holds it at arm's length with a snap, folds it in half and in half again. What are you doing? I ask. Folding blankets, he says, casual, like this is what he does on the regular, and why am I surprised? Weren't they folded? Yeah, but not very well, he says, as he plucks another from the folded pile and refolds it. A blue crocheted blanket a friend of his mom's crocheted, with crooked fingers and a tender heart. It's laundry, he says, as he restacks the blankets. You know I'm in charge of laundry. Next, he straightens Jake's shoes, white walking shoes, saltwater sandals, red tennis shoes with red rubber toes. He lifts the toddler-sized shoes off their shelf, sets them on the changing table, places them back where he found them. I've been doing laundry, I say, my voice like rocks in a tumbler. But it's my job, he says, and I know I'm behind. He grins at me with his Siberian husky blue eyes, and the crabby that was climbing my throat, that was climbing my chest into my throat, that was almost past my teeth, melts. This receding tide of hurt and longing. I've missed you, I say, my ache so loud it pounds in my ears. I know, Kent says. I have to go now. But I start. Don't go, I plead, please. My feet unstick and I launch across the room, sling my arms around my beloved. My chest fuses to him. My chest fuses to his. I love you. I love you too, he says. You were my one true thing. Stay, I say, because I know I'm in dreamland and I know where these dreams go. I keep my ear plastered to his chest, afraid to see his face, afraid to see he's turning to shadow like I know he will. I have to go, he says, as his body melts. A pile of slushy snow covers my bare feet, my chipped Tiffany blue nail polish. Don't, I scream as I race out of Jake's room, down the stairs, yank open the metal front door, the one I spied the chaplain through the night Kent died, and the hand-wringing chaplain woke me up. In the driveway, our mangled Honda Prelude punched through from the right headlight to the rear left fender, splashed in blood red. I woke to tears, my heart and breath jammed in my throat, gasping. Just me in my bed, just me clinging to sheets, just me. I whispered on repeat what I'd been practicing saying, even though I wasn't sure I believed it yet. His death was his own. It had nothing to do with me.